Is good. Wherever you want to sit, grab a drink, please have a seat.
Screen? Yeah. Can you see me okay, Prak? Great. Hello all. Good afternoon. Everyone has got a drink? Yeah? You're comfortable? Thank you all for coming. And of course, today I think is the start of winters, right? How cold it was this morning. I think in Brighton it was by 9 o'clock it was nine degrees, which was a bit shock to the system. But there we are for the long winters in the UK. Hopefully it will finish by April, May next year. But we have got some good presentations over here for you today. Got amazing two speakers, Michael, who is here, and Zubin. But before we start that, I would like to give you a brief overview of Dotsquares, who are new. I can see a lot of new faces in the room over here. I'm Bankim Chandra, founder and CEO of Dotsquares. So Dotsquares started back in 2002. We used to do simple web applications at that time. And as the industry grew, changed, we diversified ourselves from web to mobile, cloud solutions, CRM, e-commerce, you name it. We have currently got about 1,000+ engineers. And we have got a GCC based in India, a couple of offices in the UK, US, Australia, sales office in Dubai. So we have expanded and diversified ourselves. I would say in the last 3 years, we wanted to become one basket solution, and hence we started working on cybersecurity solutions and services. And we were lucky enough to partner with Keyfactor, thanks to Michael, right at the start of that relationship at that service. Of course, as we all know, the importance of cybersecurity, how the world has changed, it's a protection policy. All the businesses, they should consider, if they're already not, startups, SMEs, enterprise, corporates, everyone needs it. If you're looking for the next round of funding, that's what the investor will be asking you the first question. Are your systems fully secured? What kind of processes you have? What kind of testing has been done on it? I don't know that much about it, but that's why I think Michael and Zubin are here for. So I would like to now introduce Michael G. Parry, and who can tell us just quickly about Keyfactor, and then we can move on to Zubin, who can talk about cybersecurity.
Yeah. Thank you, Bankham. I just want to set something straight. I don't know much about cybersecurity either, just a little bit. But so Keyfactor, we do something called PKI. Any hands for anyone that knows what PKI is? Exactly what I thought. I know one of you do, because yeah, there we go. Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to talk about what PKI is later. I'm going to keep it really basic and really simple because it's an extremely hard concept, but I'll explain it as basically as possible. The crazy thing about PKI is single one of you uses it, but you just don't know it. So we sell something that you have to have, but you just don't know that you've got it. So yeah, I'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you. Over to Zubin. Can he hear us?
Zubin. Yeah, he can hear you. My camera.
Great.
Could you let me know if I'm visible? Yes, you are visible. I am? Okay, I just opened the screen on the
Sorry.
I can kind of see myself in there. And everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. And just a quick check, audible properly as well, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let me just quickly go ahead and share my screen. And then one final check before I start. It just popped on, right? Yep. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for joining in. This is the Game of Threats, where we talk about cybersecurity and PKI in general, and then we'll have a look at what cybersecurity is in 2024, what the landscape looks like, what we do to assist our customers and organizations that we work with, and any other potential solutions and question and answers that anyone might have. I'll start with who am I? So I've been tinkering with cybersecurity and then IT aspects since the last 15 years. Essentially, I've been breaking stuff since the last 15 years, as a lot of the customers that I've worked with would say. I am definitely a Linux cybersecurity and an ICS, industrial control system security enthusiast, and I am very active in the open source community that we all derive inspiration and source from while we work in cybersecurity doing a really job. Um, I also kind of do vulnerability research, and we've been training and speaking at various conferences as a part of the organization as well. So I think we've been to the largest hacking conventions, DEF CON, Black Hat US, Black Hat Vegas, Black Hat London, activity in Budapest, Colchester, in Moscow, Africa, California, and Paris, to name a few. And then I've also managed to crack a few cybersecurity certifications during my time working as a cybersecurity professional. And now, if we talk about the internet right now, right, in 2024, why cybersecurity is an utmost essential is a latter aspect, but then let me just quickly give you an overview of what we're doing on the internet every day. So about 230 million email messages are sent every minute. I know that's a staggering figure. I had to look it up twice, but that is an approximate figure that multiple sources have quoted. Google gets searched 6 million times every minute. About 25,000 applications are downloaded from app stores per day. If we talk about cyber attacks, about 30,000 attacks take place per every day, and these are cybersecurity attacks that we kind of know about. There are a lot of cybersecurity attacks that go undetected. Malware, which has been frequently on the rise, we get about 560,000 malware variants detected every day by various threat intelligence providers, various intel collectors, and open source community, right? And then ransomware, which has been on the rise since the last 5 years or so, and specifically since COVID came, and then we started working a lot more remotely than we previously used to. So systems were stood up to facilitate remote working, and then that is the favorite attack vector for ransomware attack. If you talk about technology usage, I think most of us are familiar with where technology goes. So we have IoT devices, IoT sensors that are used for heating in various infrastructures. You can obviously go ahead and start a fire remotely. So that is again radio frequency, which can be tampered with. Tesla has been broken into multiple times today, and then there are various other car providers that have gotten their remote systems taken into 3D printers. Sure. Diabetic pumps and pacemakers. This is a very fascinating aspect. So these devices are also IoT powered, and then they do 5 years ago from now, where someone demonstrated how you could remotely hack into a pacemaker. It was scary and fascinating at the same time. Robotic surgeries, again, utilize IoT and internet connected devices, and then smart buildings. I think we encounter them every day. In terms of who the target is, or a lot of people ask me that, am I even vulnerable to cyber attacks? Is this even valid in my case, or should we be worried about cyber attacks? So a large percent of malware, and then this is a very high number, about 70 to 80% that goes undetected. So organizations don't even realize that they are facing a malware attack until it's too late, and that is where digital forensics and incident response comes into picture. 70 to 80% of critical infrastructure companies have reported cyber attacks in the last 5 years or so. Again, a very high number. If we talk about how internet has evolved and how it facilitates these attacks that can take place, there are websites like Shodan, Census, Zoomai. You could literally go on there, type in a website, put in an IP address, and then it will start listing information about what the website looks like, what kind of attack surface it has, what services are exposed to the internet, what could you potentially target, what are vulnerabilities that could be exploited. So that is a lot of information that any business that has an e-presence that gets published right on websites like these. You can of course log on to the darknet, and then you could probably buy denial of service attacks or malwares for a few $100s. Even security companies are wary of this, and then even security companies get impacted. Right? So in a nutshell, anyone who has an e-presence, and if you are lucrative on a target, or if the attacker is motivated enough, you would probably a part of the attack vectors. And then, like I say to a lot of people that I talk with in the cybersecurity space and in the IT space, so a breach is just a matter of when, not if, given the current rise in cybersecurity attacks. So no organizations at this point are foolproof of preventing themselves from cyber attacks. A quick dive into the security landscape in 2024, right? So AI has been significantly on the rise since the last couple of years. I think ChatGPT came out later in the later half of 2022, and then since then we have had Bard, Microsoft doing their own OpenAI LLM implementation. We've had Anthropic. We have open LLVMs. We have Llama, so on and so forth. So various LLMs that have been published, and then companies are exposing their APIs. Now, again, this works in favor and then against cybersecurity folks as well. So it can be leveraged by both sides, and it is essential that we as defenders or we as proactive cybersecurity practitioners should leverage AI. Quantum computing, and this is one of my favorites these days. So right now, the encryption that we know of would be broken in a manner of a few minutes or hours with quantum computing. So once we reach this capacity, the current encryption standards, these would not be the same anymore, right? And then one of the reasons we admire Key Factor and what they are doing in this space is they've Key Factor has their own PKI solution, which is called EJBCA. EJBCA is already rolling out post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. So even a quantum computer or quantum computing would have a hard time tracking that, as we do with current computing and current encryption standards. So staying ahead of the curve. So that is, I think, a very commendable job there. Zero trust architecture, of course, that has been on the rise. So don't trust anything and always verify. And a lot of organizations have started putting this concept into practice in the last 5 years or so. Supply chain attacks, again, one of the highest rising threat, I would say. I think back in 2022, SolarWinds got compromised. It's one of the largest vendors out there who do a lot of tooling for organizations. And then this was a supply chain attack. So SolarWinds got compromised, and then about 20,000 of their customers, they got compromised as well. Essentially, supply chain is basically you compromise a vendor or you compromise a piece of software at its root. So when it gets pushed, the malicious code with it gets pushed as well. Web application threats. This is one of my personal favorites, and I've been doing pen testing for about a decade now. All web applications or APIs that we interface with on a day-to-day basis are potentially vulnerable to cyber attacks, and this is what the entry point is for most of the attackers. It's either through the web applications that's front, or it's through network components that are exposed. Evolving phishing tactics, again, this is significantly interesting, and especially given the rise in AI, right? Now you could imitate folks that you want to phish. You could create free text. You could gain a lot of context by using AI. You could even use deepfakes, right, to populate certain phishing campaigns. And then this has been, I think, the favorite attack vector for threat actors that send out such malicious campaigns, because you can go ahead and fix applications, network, mobile applications, but then as humans, we are always vulnerable to falling for the right email. So this is more or less a good overview, I believe, of cybersecurity landscape in 2024. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Anything that you'd like to discuss? Okay, I think we're good. In terms of what is cyber resilience, and this is our motto as Dotsquares and as a cybersecurity company, we want to proactively identify threats, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations that could be leveraged by attackers or malicious actors. And then we want to ensure that your businesses do not get impacted, irrespective of whether you're getting attacked or not. So we want to minimize the damage that can be caused and proactively identify any vulnerabilities that would lead to that damage. That is what we would um, constitute as cyber resilience in a nutshell. Again, the path to cyber resilience. This is not entirely as simple as it looks, because there are lots of concepts involved in being cyber resilient. So you'll probably have to go through certain offensive security assessments, and then you'll probably need some defensive measures as well, right? But every industry across the globe, whether it's transport, energy, banking, health, financial, IT companies, everyone is potentially vulnerable. And then in order to be cyber resilient, there are a few key steps that need to be taken that would give you some visibility, and it'll ensure at least a way forward towards being cyber resilient. Now, if you talk about the ever increasing demand for cybersecurity, and I think this is one of the most powerful aspects that we see evolving in the current IT as a trend, right? Um, in terms of data breaches that we've seen, so over the last 4 or 5 years, there have been massive data breaches, and then you'll probably see that the biggest names in the industry, if we talk about Meta, if we talk about X, Twitter, if we talk about LinkedIn, Equifax, JP Morgan, eBay, all of these companies have reported a data breach in the last 5 years or so. And that's not all. If we talk about ransomware attacks in the last 5 years, um, these have significantly increased. And in 2024, the average ransom payment is attributed to $500,000. Um, there is an estimation that about 40 to 50% of the ransomware victims pay the ransom. So if you get a ransomware attack, your business operations are halted. You're essentially not able to run the entire operation, right? There are no two ways about it, because once your systems get encrypted, you basically get locked out of those. Either you restore from a backup, or you go ahead and pay the ransom. Backups are most organizations, while they do follow a backup DR strategy, but then what we've seen and then what the statistic says us is not every backup that is taken is either the latest one or is in a state that can be reproduced. So a lot of people and organizations that get affected by ransomware, they end up paying. Top 5 countries that get impacted. So USA, UK, Germany, Canada, and Australia are the top 5 countries that experience the majority of ransomware attacks. And then if we talk about the common attack vectors and what gets targeted, it's the things that the IT operations facilitate usually for their employees and then for the customers. So remote access softwares like Pulse Secure and other VPN appliances were the most targeted appliances and the most targeted softwares in 2024. So essentially, anything that you're exposing outside that enables people to come inside your intranet or facilitate access into the environment is being targeted. Just overview of a few recent ransomware and data breaches that have happened. So MGM and Caesars, they got a breach and a ransomware attack back in 2023, and then I think they lost about $100 million, and then they also paid a ransom of about $15 million. MoveIt was another big hack. City of Dallas, again compromised in 2023. Boeing, T-Mobile, I could go on the largest names. There is a very huge list of data breaches and cybersecurity incidents that have taken place. Um, that being said, how do we come into the picture? How do we enable organizations to become cyber resilient? What can we offer as potential, partners? We do a lot of offensive security assessments. We do PK implementation consulting. We layer out cybersecurity assessments for any particular domain or aspect that an organization could require. So, in case a network needs to be tested, we can perform network penetration testing on that. For applications and APIs, we have application security assessments and then API security assessments. IoT security assessments is something that we've been doing frequently. Internal active directory assessments, phishing, which would be social engineering assessments, the security awareness training, open source diligence gathering. Again, this is one of my personal favorites, where we go to Google, GitHub, Wayback URLs, Darknet, various other sources, and we'll try to gather as much information as possible about people and organizations. And then usually we do find a lot of juicy information that would enable us to perform targeted attacks and then even find our way inside the network. We also do certain DFIR assessments. So lately we've been reached by a few customers that did not have a proactive cybersecurity approach, right? It was too late when they realized that they had already been breached. So we do perform digital forensics and incident response as well in order to eliminate threats. Are there any questions at this point?
You ever negotiated a payment hacker?
Very good. All right. Did you get that, Zubin?
Sorry,
The speaker.
I am unable to.
Can you hear me now?
Zubin, can you hear Bankim?
Which one is the mic? This one? Zubin, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Great. Zubin, Daniel has got a question for you.
Zubin, it's Daniel at Ocean. How you doing? Have you ever negotiated a payment with someone who was charging £500,000? That's my first question. Second question is, how do we get into this business? Because it makes a lot more money than mine.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Now, have you ever negotiated someone actually being paid? And how long does it take?
That's an interesting story. So we were working for a client based out in the Middle East, and they were a significantly large enterprise. And this was, I think, May 2020 or 2019, where an infamous exploit was released. It was called Eternal Blue. This was an exploit that actually was developed by a threat actors called shadow brokers. And then shadow brokers were basically a government-funded organization. So they had access to a lot of tooling and they had an unlimited budget, right? Somehow, this particular tool set got leaked. There was another threat group that was responsible for this. This got leaked, the exploit got public. And then this exploit, it exploited something that exists on every Microsoft server or every Microsoft, Windows. So every Microsoft operating system has this service, right? The day this exploit got released, there were, I think, millions of attacks that day. There's a guy from the UK, Marcus Hutchins. He was the guy who managed to find a bypass or a sinkhole for this particular attack. But then coming back to the question, the organization that we were working with, they got heavily targeted. They had a lot of attack surface exposure. There was a ransomware demand. I don't recall the exact numbers, but it was going up in millions of dollars. At that point, even their operations got stuck, right? We did manage to bring some servers back from backup. So there was a conversation where it was discussed that we'll go ahead and pay the ransom, but then a general consensus that we have within cybersecurity is we try to restore from backup first. If that fails, then you go ahead and try to work out the ransom. But the only caveat to paying ransom is there is no guarantee. You can pay the ransom, but then you don't have assurances that your systems would get unlocked. We created a plan. We started restoring from backups, and then I think we were able to manage to get their critical systems back online, and then the ransom amount wasn't paid. So I kind of have experience dealing with this. Ransomware attackers, what they do is they would leave a file on your desktop, so everything else on your system would get encrypted, but just a file, text file on a desktop that would be accessible. You'll get a greeting from the ransomware group. They'll tell you they compromise your systems. This is the encryption that you're using. It will take you 1,000 years to break into that encryption. And then there is a Bitcoin address down there. And then they do a quick math. We've compromised about 1,000 servers. You pay about $2,500 per system, and then they, put in the final amount. So while I've had first-hand experience with this, I've never had to actually facilitate a ransomware transaction, if that answers.
Do they take money in Bitcoin then?
Yes, so ransomware group, they would ask for money in Bitcoin because if you talk about fiat currency, right, it can be traced back, but then it's a lot more harder to track cryptocurrencies. And that is why they facilitate all ransomware attackers. They only facilitate transactions in cryptocurrencies, and BTC being their favorite.
I think great insight what you have given here, Zubin. Thank you. And I think, of course, it makes sense, right? You try to get your latest backup, use that to restore your systems, and then see still what else is vital information with them, or what else vital information is for the company which we require, and then make a negotiation based on that.
I had a
Was it? Oh, well, that's good.
I don't know why they said $500,000.
How many years back was that then?
12 years.
Yeah. Have you encountered, Michael, anything like that?
We encounter things like that all the time, but it's slightly different because the certificate's going down. But there's a case where Ferrari had one certificate that went down. Yeah, I'll stop you. We had one. Yeah, Ferrari had one certificate go down, and it cost them $10 million just because of one certificate being lost.
You need to first explain what's the certificate.
That's the exact point. Yeah, that's the problem.
Zubin, anything else left in your presentation for us?
I did want to cover a case study and something that we call it.
We're listening.
Okay. Red team. All right, cool. Thank you. Red teaming. So this is basically derived from the military terminology, where they try and simulate what would happen if a real life attack was supposed to happen, right? We translate this into cybersecurity, and then we target three core elements that we call information security trinity. So your physical aspects, the human element, so the people that work for the organizations, and then of course your cyber infrastructure. What this enables is you get a real life depiction of what would happen if someone was to go ahead and target you specifically. These are very targeted attacks, and then these have a very high rate of success due to the nature of targets that we put into this assessment. This is just a quick case study of what we do as a part of red teaming assessments. And This was done for a large telecommunications operator back in the Middle East. We start small by sending out phishing emails. So phishing emails would basically lure people into clicking links or downloading something and clicking on that, or splurging away their credentials, which they shouldn't otherwise. Um, from phishing, we were able to gain access to a set of credentials that were then utilized to log on to one of the external facing applications. Now, this external facing application also had an interface with the API that it was calling from the backend. So, in a nutshell, we were able to manage, getting a foothold into their intranet. Um, Although this was in the DMZ, as far as I remember, from the DMZ, we tried and did something that we call lateral movement. So lateral movement would be traversing between various systems. So I have access to my system, but then I want to jump onto Pratt's system, for instance. So that would be lateral movement. And then eventually, what we were able to do, we were able to compromise their entire Active Directory forest, which had multiple child forests in them, and essentially owning the entire organization. This demonstrates a very critical business impact, and it is a significantly higher risk for any organization if someone is able to break into their domain controllers and then hijack their files, which has credentials for every user. You can probably guess the kind of havoc it could create. And then last but not the least, we kind of do a lot of research and development, and then we are actively contributing to the cybersecurity space. Our research has been published in a few global media outlets, so the Hacker News, Sleeping Computers, TechCrunch, TechPost, The Register, UK being a few of them. And then we also target a lot of publicly available applications and uh, try to identify bugs in them so they can be patched, and then we can improve the overall security of those applications. So we found bugs in smart TVs, in internet messengers, in certain browsers, in Android applications, in iOS applications, in thin clients, in thick clients, and then quite a few of them, they also got published in a few media channels. I think that's all from my side.
I think there's one question, Zubin. There's one question, Zubin. David, do you want to come over here? There you go.
Hi, Stephen. It's David. We've met before a few times. Love your thing about $500,000 ransom and getting full control back. So that's my first marriage. Didn't work. The question I had is actually more from the solution point of view. So
Can you make Zubin's face bigger?
worked with you on a few things, but when's the best point to get you involved from a consultancy point? When I'm going into a large organisation providing a complete technology solution, including website developments, everything such as, when's the actual best point to bring you in on the fiscal point? And how does that affect what we're doing in terms of actually providing a solution? Because that's a lot to take in. If someone's going to be paying me a couple of $100,000 to design a website,
yeah,
and you're not going to be attacked. So when would you say is the best point for me to bring you in?
That is a very good question. And then this is something that we encounter on a very frequent basis when we work with organizations, right? A lot of our customers, current customers, they only come to us at a point where they're already in production, their operations are already started, everything is business ready. So transactions are flowing in, cash is coming in, going out. You're doing your daily operations. But then, from a cybersecurity perspective, what I usually recommend to any customer that is in a pre-production state, or that customers that are still in development phases, try and add SSDLC instead of SDLC. So don't go with the regular software development life cycle. Try and add an extra S there, which would be security, right? So if you're developing code following various secure coding standards, so you have OWASP, you have NIST, you have CIS benchmarks, various other frameworks that could be referred to, right? We have lots of secure coding guidelines as well available, and I think each framework or tech stack has their own best practices. So if that could be introduced at an earlier stage while you're still jotting down the code for applications or APIs, that significantly hardens an application or an API, and then it makes things a lot more easier when you go to production, and then when your applications are live already. Um, this is an ideal approach, right? But then what usually we see is customers reach out to us, like applications are already in production, and then they ask us for security assessments. Now, there's nothing wrong with this approach, but then I wouldn't say that this is the best approach. Essentially, we perform a pen test after the application is ready, right? We perform a pen test. We do control security reviews. We do API security assessments, static analysis, dynamic analysis, etc. So the whole spectrum, you have a lot of results now. So you have findings. Let's say you have about 50 security observations. So you'll have to go back to the developers, and then they'll have to rewrite code. That, in my opinion, is not the best way to approach this. Second thing being, it's not so there are logical vulnerabilities, right? So something that you would only be able to address once you're writing the logic for that. Those, if we find that those kinds of vulnerabilities, which we most often do in production applications, then sometimes what is seen is the logic is hard coded in a way that you have to go back and then you have to make larger changes, right? So companies should ideally involve security when you're starting developing, but then you can also approach for cybersecurity assessments once you're live or even in your pre-production stages before you go live. That works too. But personally, I would try and inculcate SSDLC instead of SDLC. That would make things a lot easier.
Thank you
Does
very much.
that answer?
Thank you. Does that help you, David?
It does. It also
Yeah.
means I know you to get involved in the first meetings rather than having to deal with it further down the line.
Yes.
I don't necessarily wholeheartedly agree you always get the right people in the first meeting.
Mm.
You get people with a great idea.
Yeah.
Did I miss a
It's
part
a
of
great
that?
idea.
Yeah.
That's,
Or was that all?
No.
Sorry.
Thank you, Zubin. That's great. Over to Michael now. And let's hear about the certificates, Michael, you were talking about.
The certificates. Thank you. So my goal today is not for anyone to buy PKI, because you're not going to. My goal today is to actually explain to you what PKI is, so that when you leave today, you have some understanding of what PKI is and what it does. So I'm going to keep it very basic, but if we go to the next slide, I'm keeping it on the level of PKI for dummies. Now, no one take offense to this, because I was one of the dummies 18 months ago who had no clue what PKI was. And I could not figure out for the life of me for about 6 months what PKI was. But what I've decided to do is tell you a story about myself, and hopefully within that story, you should be able to understand what PKI is. So if we go to the next slide, a little bit about me. I love fast cars. So when I say I love fast cars, I own a number of cars. If there's any car people here, I work on cars myself. So I've got a Volkswagen Golf R32 that I turned, that I supercharged and did a number of things to. I've got a WRX STI, which it does 0 to 100 in about 3.9 seconds now. I had a Porsche 911. There's many cars that I've owned over time, but every time I get a car, I work on it, because I can't not work on it. The problem with this is, though, is that when you love cars, you tend to do something else. And that thing is your speed. So a fast car means that you want to go quickly. And when you want to go quickly, if we go to the next slide, what happens? The cops pull you over. So the story actually is on my 21st birthday, which was a long time ago now, nearly half a life ago. On my 21st birthday, I was driving one of my cars and I was trying to get to one of my parties. And I was speeding and I got caught speeding. So, they asked for my license and registration. I gave that to them. They fined me and off I went. Later that day, I then got pulled over again for speeding. I was going 40 kilometers an hour over the speed limit. I don't know what that is in miles. Sorry, Australian. So 40 kilometers an hour over. And once again, they asked me again for my license and registration. So if we think about that, why do they keep asking me for my license and registration? Anybody? Identity, yes. So they're trying to figure out, am I who I say I am? So the policeman will take my license, and the policeman will look at my license. There's a little photo on there that hopefully looks like me, unless it's really old, or I've put on a lot of weight, which is possible. They look at me and they say, yep, I think that is Michael de Paris. Then they go to their car, and in their car, they have a little system, and they put all my information into that system. That then goes back to the police systems. The police systems say, yes, that is Michael de Paris, and here's his history. You can continue doing what you're doing. So if we think about what's just happened, they've ID'd me. So the police know I am who I say I am. And the system knows I am who I say I am because I've got this little certificate or my license. Does that make sense? Yeah? Nodding heads? Good. Now, once they've done that, they obviously give you another fine and off you go. Now, the worst part about this story, and this is true, I got fined 3 times on my 21st birthday for speeding. I do not learn. My message to everyone is just stop speeding. It doesn't work. So, if we go to the next slide, now I'm going to try and bring that story into what PKI is. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to use a really good example. And we all know Dotsquares here, right? So everyone's worked with Dotsquares before, or hasn't, but you're here. But you go online and you go to the Dotsquares website, and you may wonder, is this really Dotsquares? So what you can actually do is, if you go to the next slide, you can click on that little lock at the top, and what it will tell you is if your connection is secure. So if your connection is unsecure, then you're in trouble. Once it's told you the connection's secure, you can then click into that, and it will tell you there is a certificate there, and it will tell you the certificate is valid. So what's happened here is that we've actually looked at PKI, and we've actually seen that Dotsquares has a certificate. If we go to the next slide, this is the actual certificate that Dotsquares has. So this is a Dotsquares certificate that tells us that everything is real. This is really Dotsquares. We can trust this site, and we can trust that we can share information with it, and it's all okay. So now let's take it back to the police. So I gave my license over, right? I gave over a certificate. So over here, there's a certificate that's coming from Sectigo, which is a PKI company, a public PKI company. What they do is they issue a certificate to Dotsquares. Over here, on your web browser, there's also a certificate that is then going through to Dotsquares. So the two will meet in the middle, and we'll say, yes, we're good. Everything's fine. That is the basis of PKI. Any questions on that? Does that make sense to anyone? Wow. Yes.
Why are they going to, so you have that coming from,
Yeah.
and you're saying there's another one coming from.
Yes. Because I have to prove who I am. Dotsquares has to prove who they are. So there's certificates coming from both ways. Does that make sense?
I think just go over there. I think I'm thinking of it from I'm looking at it very like from a conceptual point. So
yes.
If you look at AWS or GCP,
yep.
you have a certificate that come up from ACM or something. But I didn't know that it sort of like connects both. It kind of comes in 2 directions.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it sort of like changes the paradigm of how I know that operates.
Right. Let's talk about it after, because it's probably going to be very confusing for everyone else. Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, let's go with that. That's good. I like that. I'm going to use that actually. Yeah, but let's talk about it after, because yeah.
does this also go with the single sign-on or multi-factor authentication?
Yeah, PKI forms part of. Yeah. Yes. Correct. Yep. Correct. So this here is what's called public CA or public certificate authority. Key factor doesn't do public. I've used this as an example because everyone knows websites and everyone does it, right? But we do something called private CAs, which you would use within your business. So if you go to the next slide, the reason this is so important is it doesn't matter how big your business is. Next slide. You all use machines, right? So everyone's using a machine, whether you use a computer, whether you use a phone, whether you use software, whatever it might be, you're all using something, some kind of device. And all those devices need an identity so that we know that we're securely connected. So if you go to the next slide again, if you think about the types of businesses, so there's IoT and OT where they manufacture things and create essentially. So if you manufacture what's it called? You know, when you have a heart pacemaker. So a pacemaker, as an example, actually needs a certificate because pacemakers get updates. So what actually happens is you need a certificate that's hard coded into your pacemaker so that it can communicate with someone else to update that pacemaker. So that's an example of PKI. Another example would be cloud. So like you're talking about, and we can talk about that after. But machines are absolutely everywhere and they all have identities. Next slide. Some examples is, so everyone has a phone, yeah? Does everyone have an Apple or Android phone? Android? Yeah. Anyone that's got an Apple phone, every time you use your Apple phone, you're using key factor. So you probably don't realize that. But through Apple, we issue literally billions of certificates. Every time you make a payment through Apple, that's us. Every time you go to a website, you're using us. So Apple uses key factor very heavily. Sorry, Bankham, did you have a question? No. Another example is on cars. So Tesla, they use key factor. So every single Tesla car uses hard-coded key factor certificates so that you can talk between the cars. So all of these use cases are getting extremely complex, and there's more and more certificates that are being used. And the problem with that is that you as a company probably don't know that you've got these certificates. You as a company probably don't know that these certificates can actually expire. And if these certificates expire, it means that any device that has an expired certificate cannot be used in your network. It means that any machine that uses any of these certificates, if it expires, it cannot be used. So I used the example before of Ferrari. So Ferrari had a single certificate that went down, one single certificate. And the reason it went down is because they were using spreadsheets to track where these certificates were. They had no clue what was going on. When this certificate went down, the whole system stopped and it cost them millions and millions and millions of dollars because of one little certificate. It's absolutely nuts. Yes?
Concerning the certificate, when your certificate is about to expire, you normally get like 30 days or 60 days.
Yeah, that's correct, but they're shortening.
Ferrari didn't get that.
No, well, this is a problem because a lot of the time, you'll get the certificate notification on your computer or something like that. But there's a lot of certificates out there that companies don't know about. So this is happening daily, where certificates are just not known about, they go down. Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And this is a crazy thing, right? Because I said earlier, we do PKI, and you all use it, but no one knows about it, right? And this is exactly why that happens. Because no one knows that they have it, no one knows that they use it, and no one knows that they should be tracking it. Yes? Pardon?
IT heads are in regions rather than being central. And they may have signed up to this one at a time.
It can have an effect, yes. It can have an effect, but normally you've got certificate sprawl because of the regions, and there's no central place that's actually managing it. Yeah, the management is. It's absolute nightmare. Yeah, and that's why we have Dotsquares. So the way we actually work with Dotsquares is we provide the technology, but Dotsquares are the ones that actually provide the management of the certificates. Yes.
My experience is SSL
Uh-huh.
for websites.
Sure.
So what other
We can do SSL, so that's public CA. We do have we can work within public CA, but we do mainly private CA. And I can't remember the name of the certificate, so I'll look for you after. Yeah. No worries. Any other questions? So is everyone still following? This is amazing. I did not think I'd get this far. I think that I'm pretty much at the end of my slides. So I hope I've reached my goal. I hope that everyone has a minor understanding of what PKI is. I'll get to your questions later as well. Yes, please. Public key infrastructure. Yeah. Just to make it more confusing. Something that's interesting actually is Zubin was talking about post-quantum, and post-quantum is super interesting to us because PKI is the fundamental of safety in a post-quantum era. And as part of our company, we have a smaller company called Bouncy Castle, and Bouncy Castle is actually writing the post-quantum algorithms to be post-quantum safe or post-quantum resilience. And PKI is hard. Like, no one should feel like they should know about PKI, understand PKI completely. We have mathematicians that are working on this. Like the guys that are working on this are super smart. So yeah, from a PQC or PQR perspective, we're heavily involved, as Zubin said. But I think there's a long way to come until we get to that point. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Yes.
I was just gonna help everybody. If you wanna just summarize everything in one word, exactly what's the goal of the company? What are you guys trying to achieve? Be in the next 10 years. What was the main genesis? What was that point that you're trying to basically? What's that in one word? Is it resilience? Is it management? Is it
cyber resilience? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problems. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's great. Thank you, Zubin, for earlier on. So if now is the time to network over here, you will see some of us are wearing orange badges. So we all work with Dotsquares. So if any questions, please ask any of us, or else network with each other. Unless someone else wants to contribute to this very informal session. Anyone else wants to share any story? Anyone else wants to say anything else about cybersecurity and which part of journey of cybersecurity you are in? And if you want to take your organization to the next level, is there anything which Key Factor can help, which Dotsquares can help? Anyone else wants to say anything? That's it. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Yeah. Thank you to all the YouTube listeners, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.